My mother-in-law left in a hurry and forgot her cell phone on my sofa. When I decided to return it that night, the device vibrated in my hands. What I saw left me breathless. On the screen, a photo of my husband, who had died a year ago in a supposed accident. A message opened, exposing a dark secret I could never have imagined. But before we continue, check if you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. It all began on a seemingly normal Sunday afternoon. My mother-in-law, Margaret, had come to visit me, as she had once a month since Julian's death. Those visits always left me exhausted. Behind the polite smile and sweet words, there was something calculating in the way her eyes scanned every corner of the house that had once belonged to her son. "Claire, are you eating well? You look so thin," she commented as we had tea in the living room. Her words sounded concerned, but her gaze appraised me as if I were an intruder. "I'm fine, Margaret," I replied automatically, the same answer I had given for a year to anyone who asked how I was doing after losing my husband in a car accident. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of a spoon clinking against the cup. She checked her watch for the third time. "I must be going. I have engagements," she finally announced, standing up. I walked her to the door, breathing an internal sigh of relief. Watching the luxury car pull away with her private chauffeur, Mark, I closed the door and let out a deep sigh. I went back to the living room to collect the cups when I noticed something gleaming between the sofa cushions where Margaret had been sitting. It was her cell phone, an expensive, new model with a custom leather case. I took the device and ran to the window, but the car had already turned the corner. I tried to call her, but I realized her number would be on the very phone I was holding. "I'll return it later," I decided, placing the cell phone on the coffee table. The afternoon passed slowly. I organized some of Julian's documents that I still needed to sort out insurance papers, some pending contracts. Since his death, the company he had built had passed into Margaret's hands. She insisted I didn't have the experience to manage the business, and in my fragile state during those first few months, I just nodded and signed the documents that left me on the sidelines of the life we had built together. Around 9 o'clock at night, as I was preparing to take the cell phone to Margaret's house, the device began to vibrate on the table. The screen lit up, and my heart stopped. The photo that appeared was of Julian. My Julian, with that contagious smile, wearing the blue shirt I had given him for our last wedding anniversary. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. A message notification was blinking. With a lump in my throat, I unlocked the screen. Fortunately, Margaret had shown me the unlock pattern once during an emergency at the hospital. The message was from a contact saved with the name Julian. "Transfer complete. Same amount as always. When can we see each other?" I'm tired of this game. I felt my body go cold. What was this? Why would Margaret have her own son's contact saved on her phone a year after his death? And who was sending messages from this number? With my heart pounding, I opened the full conversation. There were dozens of messages exchanged over the last few months. All about money transfers, secret meetings, and mentions of an accident that had to remain a secret. The hush money arrived. "You know no one can find out about the accident," one of the older messages read. My legs gave out, and I had to sit down. A chill ran down my spine as a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. Was Julian's accident not an accident? Was my mother-in-law paying someone to keep secrets about something? I started searching frantically through the phone, looking for more clues. In the photos, I found screenshots of bank transfers to a person named Gabriela Lopez. In the emails, drafts addressed to an M, who I suspected was Mark, the chauffeur. In one of those drafts, I read something that left me breathless. He suspected. "I can't let him talk. Handle it like the other time." As I was trying to process what I was discovering, the phone vibrated in my hands again. It was a call from the same contact, Julian. After a few seconds of silence, a woman's voice cut through the air. "Margaret? Why aren't you talking? Are you afraid someone will discover our secret?" I hung up immediately, my hands trembling and my breath shallow. That voice was cold, controlling, and that woman, whoever she was, knew something about Julian's death. At that moment, as the pieces began to click into place in my mind, The doorbell rang loud, insistent, desperate. I looked through the peephole and saw Margaret standing on the doorstep, her face twisted into an expression of panic I had never seen before. And I knew, in that instant, that my life was about to change forever. My heart hammered against my chest as I watched Margaret through the peephole. Her normally controlled expression was undone, panic evident in her wide eyes and the way she repeatedly pressed the doorbell. Behind her, I could see the dark car parked with Mark at the wheel. For a moment, I froze. The cell phone in my hand felt like it weighed a ton. Should I open it? Should I confront her? Quickly, I hid the phone in the pocket of my robe and took a deep breath, trying to compose my most normal expression. 1 minute, I shouted, pretending to be busy. When I opened the door, Margaret practically forced her way past me, pushing inside. "Claire, dear," she said in an oddly strained voice. "I think I forgot my cell phone here. Did you see it?" Her eyes darted around the living room frantically. These were no longer the calculating eyes that watched me with disdain. They were the eyes of someone desperate, panicked. "Cell phone?" I repeated, trying to buy time. "I didn't notice anything, but I can help you look." She didn't answer, going straight to the sofa where she had been sitting. She tore off the cushions violently, throwing them to the floor. "I'm sure I left it here," she muttered, more to herself than to me. I watched her rummage through the room, feeling the weight of the device in my pocket. The woman in front of me was no longer my polished, restrained mother-in-law. This was a person capable of conspiring against her own son. A murderer. "Maybe it fell in the car," I suggested, keeping my voice steady even though my entire body was trembling. She spun toward me abruptly. Her eyes studied me, suspicious. "We already checked the car," she replied curtly. "Claire, are you sure you didn't see my phone? It's very important." In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, "Actually, I did find it. I was just about to bring it to your house." Brief relief washed over her face, quickly replaced by caution. "Where is it?" "Give it to me now." She extended her hand, impatient. "First," I said, surprising both of us with my firmness, "I want to understand why you have Julian's number saved on your phone and why someone is sending messages from that number a year after his death." The blood drained from Margaret's face. Her outstretched hand trembled and then fell to her side. For a second, I thought she might faint. Then, as if a mask snapped back into place, her expression hardened. "You read my private messages?" Her voice was an icy whisper. The phone rang. I saw my husband's picture on the screen. I answered, every word loaded with a rage I never knew existed inside me. "Who is Gabriela Lopez, and why are you paying her? What really happened to Julian?" Margaret took a step in my direction, and I instinctively stepped back. "You don't know what you're talking about. Give me the phone now and forget what you saw, for your own good, Claire." It sounded like a threat, and it was. I realized it by the way her eyes narrowed, calculating something. She glanced briefly toward the window, where the car with Mark was waiting, and then back at me. "No," I replied, surprising myself with my own courage. "I'm not giving anything back until I know the truth. Julian didn't die in an accident, did he? What did you do to him?" She stood motionless for a long moment, as if considering her options. Then, her lips curled into a cold smile I had never seen before. "You were always naive, Claire, believing in that facade of a perfect marriage. Julian was about to ruin everything I built. He discovered things about the business that needed to stay buried. He was going to report me. Did you know that? My own son." The words dripped from her like venom, and each one struck my heart like an arrow. "So you ordered him killed?" I managed to ask, my voice almost disappearing. "I protected what's mine," she replied simply, as if discussing any business decision. "And now you're in my way, too. Do you really think you can do anything against me? I'm the one in control of everything now." Just then, I heard the sound of the back door opening. Mark had come in from behind, while Margaret distracted me. Panic consumed me. They had come to silence me, just as they did with Julian. "Help!" I screamed instinctively, running toward the front door. Margaret tried to grab me, but I managed to dodge her. Mark appeared in the living room entrance, blocking my escape to the kitchen. I was cornered. "There's no use screaming, Claire," Margaret said with terrifying calm. "No one is going to hear you, and even if they do, what will they see? Just a disturbed widow having a nervous breakdown. A tragedy, but predictable after everything that's happened." Mark approached slowly with something that looked like a syringe in his hand. My eyes darted around the room desperately, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything. "It will be quick," my mother-in-law continued. "Then we'll find your body. An overdose, perhaps. So sad you couldn't get over your husband's death." In that moment, I made the only decision I could. I pulled the cell phone from my pocket and held it up. "If anything happens to me, the police will receive all the messages. I've already forwarded them to my email and to friends." It was a lie, but the only chance I had. Margaret hesitated, her eyes fixed on the device in my hand. "You're lying," she said, but there was doubt in her voice. "Do you want to take that risk? I have copies of everything. The transfers to Gabriella, the emails to Mark, the messages about the accident. What do you think the police will think?" Mark stopped, looking at Margaret for guidance. She seemed to be calculating her options, a vein pulsing in her forehead. "Mark, get her phone. Check if she really sent anything." The chauffeur advanced in my direction, but in that instant, I did something even I didn't expect. I ran to the window and threw it open with a sharp movement. "One more step, and I'll throw the phone onto the street," I yelled, stretching my arm outside. We were on the second floor, and there was movement of people passing below. Margaret froze. "Claire, be reasonable. Let's talk like adults." Her tone changed completely, now trying to calm me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "It's over, Margaret. You're going to tell me exactly what happened to Julian, or this phone will end up in the hands of the police." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with tension. I saw the look Margaret exchanged with Mark, a look that said everything. They couldn't kill me there. Not right then. Not with evidence that could get away. "Mark, wait in the car," she finally ordered. The chauffeur hesitated but obeyed, leaving through the back door. When we were alone, Margaret sat on the sofa, suddenly looking aged. "What do you want to know?" she asked, defeated. "Everything," I replied, still holding the phone tightly. "Starting with who Gabriella Lopez is." "Gabriella Lopez," Margaret sighed, saying the name as if it were a curse. "She was Julian's partner in a side project, and venture he kept hidden from me." Still holding the phone tightly, I sat in the opposite chair, keeping my distance. My entire body was on high alert, ready to run if necessary. "What kind of project?" I asked, trying to piece together the puzzle of my husband's secret life. "Real estate. Some low-income housing complex," she replied with disdain. "Julian always had those philanthropic ideas. He thought he could build quality housing for low-income people and still make a profit. Nonsense. That sounded exactly like the Julian I knew and loved. Always concerned with making a difference, with using business for something more than just profit. It was one of the reasons I fell in love with him. And what does that have to do with his death?" Margaret settled on the sofa, as if choosing her words carefully. "Julian discovered irregularities in the main company's accounts. Substantial embezzlement. He was determined to order a full audit. Embezzlement that you committed. I completed, finally understanding." She faced me coldly. "Business is complicated, Claire. You would never understand. I built this empire for decades, doing what was necessary. Julian wanted to throw it all away because of a few financial shortcuts. So you ordered him killed," I accused, feeling the rage swell. "Your own son?" "Don't be dramatic," she retorted, but she didn't deny it. "It was a necessary adjustment. He was going to report me, destroy everything I built. The day before his death, we had a horrible argument. He threatened to take incriminating documents to the police. Her every word was like a stab. I remembered that night. Julian had come home agitated, worried. He said we needed to talk about something serious, but first he wanted to organize some documents. The next morning, he died in what everyone believed was a car accident when his brakes failed on a steep downhill road outside the city. "How did you do it?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. A cold smile crossed Margaret's face. "I didn't get my hands dirty, if that's what you're asking. Mark handled the technical details. He has contacts in the mechanic world. It was quick, I think. Julian didn't even realize what was happening. The ease with which she spoke of her son's death disgusted me. How could anyone be so cold, so calculating? And Gabriella? How did she find out? That clever bitch. Margaret practically spat the words. After Julian died, I found the documents for his project. I tried to take control, but she had proof of the partnership. She started asking questions about the accident, implying she knew something. To keep her quiet, I had to pay. The pieces were falling into place. The messages, the transfers. It all made a terrible kind of sense. And why save her contact with Julian's name and photo? I asked, still confused about that detail. A sentimental slip, perhaps, she replied with a shrug. Or just a reminder of why I'm paying that woman. I looked at the phone in my hands, the evidence of a horrendous crime, of a conspiracy that had taken Julian from me, the man I loved, killed by his own mother to protect dirty business. I'm taking this to the police, I declared. Margaret laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. And what exactly are you going to say? That you broke into my phone? That you read private messages? The messages are vague, Claire. Nothing there is an explicit confession. It will be your word against mine. An emotionally unstable widow against a respected businesswoman. I have the bank transfers, the emails to Mark, legitimate transfers to a business partner. Emails that could mean anything, she cut in. Not to mention I have the best lawyers money can buy. A heavy silence fell between us. She was right, I realized with desperation. Even with the phone, it would be difficult to prove anything concrete. I needed more, a clear confession, irrefutable proof. What do you want, Claire? Margaret asked, suddenly pragmatic. Money? I can be generous. A lifetime pension, perhaps? Or would you prefer a stake in the company? We can reach an agreement. She was offering me a bribe. She wanted to buy my silence, just as she bought Gabriella's, as if she could put a price on Julian's life, on my love, on justice. I want the truth, I replied firmly. And I want justice. Margaret stood up, elegantly adjusting the expensive clothes she wore. Truth rarely brings peace, Claire, and justice is a relative concept. Think about my offer. You can have a comfortable life, or you can destroy yourself trying to fight an impossible battle. She walked to the door, stopping before she left. I'll let you keep the phone for now. Consider it a gesture of good faith. When you're ready to be rational, call me. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone with my chaotic thoughts and a cell phone full of dark secrets. I spent hours sitting in the living room, mentally replaying every word of our conversation. Margaret was right about one thing. It would be almost impossible to prove anything with just the messages and emails. I needed more. I needed to find Gabriella Lopez. With trembling hands, I picked up Margaret's phone again. There were dozens of messages exchanged with the contact saved as Julian. If Gabriella was on the other end of those messages, maybe there was something that could help me find her. I went back to the beginning of the conversation, carefully reading each exchange. After almost an hour, I found what I was looking for. In one of the oldest messages, Gabriella mentioned a meeting at a cafe downtown, the Daily Grind. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a place she frequented. Maybe the employees knew her. Maybe they could give me more information. I looked at the clock. Almost midnight. The cafe would be closed, but I could go in the morning. I didn't have much time. Margaret had let me go this time, but I had no doubt she was already planning how to silence me permanently. As I prepared for sleep, something I knew would be impossible that night, an idea began to form in my mind. If Gabriella was blackmailing Margaret, it meant she had something concrete, some real proof of the conspiracy, proof that I needed to find. The Daily Grind, in the Wicker Park neighborhood of Chicago, was exactly as its name suggested. A cozy place where the smell of freshly ground coffee mixed with the murmur of conversations. I sat at a strategic table where I could watch the entrance while pretending to read a book. I had slept very little, tormented by nightmares where Julian called to me, asking for help, as he drifted further and further away. I ordered a strong coffee and watched the employees. Which one of them might know Gabriella? After a few minutes, I decided on the direct approach. I called over a middle-aged waitress who looked like she had worked there for a while. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Gabriela Lopez. Do you know if she comes here often?" I asked, trying to sound casual. The waitress studied me with curiosity. "Gabriela? Yeah, she's a regular. Comes in almost every morning around 10 a.m. Always orders a macchiato and sits at that corner table." She pointed to a table partially hidden by a plant divider. My heart sped up. "Thanks. She owes me some money, and I lost her contact," I lied, trying to justify my interest. The waitress smiled, clearly not convinced by my story, but too professional to question it. "Well, it's 9:45. If you wait a bit, you might get lucky today." I thanked her and returned to my table, now nervous about the possibility of meeting Gabriela so soon. What would I say to her? How would I approach the subject without scaring her off? She could be dangerous or involved in Julian's death in some way I didn't know. Exactly at 10:05, the cafe door opened and a woman entered, tall, elegant, in a well-tailored suit, with her hair pulled back in a flawless bun. She moved with natural confidence, greeting the employees like old acquaintances. Something about her vaguely reminded me of Margaret, the same haughty posture, the same air of authority. I watched her place her usual order and head to the corner table. I waited for her to get settled before I stood up, my heart beating so loud I thought everyone in the cafe could hear it. With steps I tried to keep steady, I approached her table. "Gabriela Lopez?" I asked, my voice more shaky than I wanted. She looked up from her tablet, analyzing me with a sharp gaze. "Yes, and you are." "Claire," I replied simply. "Claire Morales." Her face changed instantly. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Alarm? Interest? Caution? "Julian's widow," she said, not as a question, but a statement. "Please, sit down." I obeyed, feeling strangely intimidated. Up close, I noticed Gabriela was younger than she appeared from a distance, probably my age. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "How did you find me?" she asked directly. I hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. I took Margaret's cell phone out of my bag and placed it on the table. "My mother-in-law forgot this at my house yesterday. I saw messages from you coming from a contact saved as Julian." Gabriela looked at the phone as if it were a bomb about to explode. Her eyes narrowed. "You read the messages?" "Yes," I admitted. "And after that, Margaret told me about the accident. About what she did to my husband." Gabriela glanced around discreetly, checking if anyone could hear us. She leaned forward. "Margaret told you? She just confessed to murdering her own son?" There was disbelief in her voice. She admitted she had Mark handle the technical details, that Julian had discovered embezzlement in the companies and was threatening to report her. A bitter smile formed on Gabriela's lips. Typical of her. Always distancing herself from the filth, subcontracting the dirty work. "You were his partner," I stated, remembering what Margaret had said, "on a housing project." Gabriela nodded slowly. Julian was brilliant. He had vision. He wanted to use part of the company's profits to create affordable, high-quality housing. Your mother-in-law, obviously, thought that was a waste of resources. "Why are you taking money from her?" I asked, getting straight to the point. "Is it blackmail?" "I prefer to call it compensation," Gabriela replied, not denying it. "After Julian died, Margaret tried to take my share of the project. I had proof of the partnership, so she couldn't. But I also had suspicions." "About the accident? What kind of suspicions?" Gabriela took a sip of her coffee before answering. "Julian called me the night before he died. He was agitated. He said he had discovered something serious in the main company's finances. He said he had proof, documents that would incriminate his mother in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. This matched Julian's behavior that last night at home." "And do you have concrete proof of her involvement in his death?" I asked, hope growing in my chest. "I have enough to scare her and guarantee my monthly payments," Gabriela replied with a shrug. "But for a court? I don't know. And you're content with that?" I couldn't hide the outrage in my voice. "Taking money from the woman who killed your partner instead of seeking justice?" For the first time, Gabriela seemed uncomfortable. Business is business, Claire. I'm sorry about Julian, really. He was a good man. But what could I do? I didn't have concrete proof, just suspicions. And Margaret is powerful. She has contacts everywhere. I stared at her with a mix of disappointment and frustration. Julian deserves justice. I need your help, Gabriella. I need to know exactly what happened, and I need proof I can take to the police. Gabriella was silent for a long moment, studying me intently. Finally, she sighed. Look, I'm not your enemy, Claire. I also want Margaret to pay for what she did, but we need to be smart about it. I'm listening, I replied, feeling a spark of hope. Margaret made sure to clean up any direct trail from the crime. But Mark, her chauffeur? He's the weak link. He's the one who bribed the mechanic to sabotage the brakes on Julian's car. How do you know that? Gabriella opened her purse and took out a small USB drive. Because I have this. A security camera recording from the garage where Julian's car was serviced the night before the accident. It shows Mark paying the mechanic. It's not definitive proof, but it's a start. I looked at the small object with fascination. The first concrete proof of the conspiracy that killed Julian. Why are you helping me? I asked, looking at the USB drive in my hand. You were happy just taking Margaret's payments. What changed? Gabriella looked away for a moment, something in her expression hardening. I'm tired of this game, she finally admitted. At first, I thought I could live with the arrangement. After all, it was lucrative and kept me safe. But Margaret's veiled threats are constant. The feeling of always looking over my shoulder. And, she paused, seeming to weigh her words. Julian deserved better than that. I put the USB drive in my bag, as if it were a precious treasure. In a way, it was. What do I do now? Take this straight to the police? Gabriella shook her head. It wouldn't be enough. It's circumstantial evidence at best. We need more. We need Mark to confess, or better yet, for Margaret to confess. And how would we get that? I asked, feeling lost. A calculating gleam appeared in Gabriella's eyes, so similar to Margaret's that it sent a chill down my spine. I have a plan, she said, leaning closer. But it's going to require courage. Margaret thinks I'm on her side, that our deal is still in place. We can use that to our advantage. As she spoke, a bold plan began to take shape. We would use Margaret's cell phone to lure Mark to an isolated place, an old industrial warehouse that belonged to the companies but was decommissioned, on the outskirts of Chicago. Gabriella would convince Margaret that I had discovered additional evidence and that we needed to solve the problem permanently. Margaret won't come personally for something so dirty, Gabriella explained. She'll send Mark, but she'll be monitoring everything closely, probably through calls with him. And what if he tries to hurt me? I asked, fear growing inside me. You won't be alone, Gabriella guaranteed. I have reliable contacts who will provide security. We'll hide cameras and microphones throughout the warehouse. The idea is to provoke a confession. Record everything. Hopefully, Mark will implicate Margaret directly. The plan seemed like something out of a thriller movie, not the life of a middle-class widow who, until a year ago, led a quiet existence. But I was no longer that woman. Julian's death, and now these revelations, had transformed me. When? I asked simply. Tonight, Gabriella replied. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes for you. Margaret knows you discovered her secret. She won't let it go. I agreed. I exchanged phone numbers with Gabriella, and we arranged the final details. She would give me precise instructions by text on how to get to the warehouse without being detected. As we parted, Gabriella held my arm. Claire, understand one thing. After we start this, there's no turning back. Margaret is dangerous. If our plan fails... I know, I interrupted, but I can't let her get away with what she did to Julian. I returned home, careful not to be followed, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my bag and fear in my heart. The next few hours were torture. I checked the windows and doors countless times, jumping at every noise. I mentally rehearsed what I would say when I confronted Mark. How would I react if things went wrong? Around 5 p.m., I received the message from Gabriella with the exact coordinates and instructions on how to get there. I had to wear dark clothes, leave my cell phone at home so I couldn't be tracked, and take a regular taxi instead of using apps that could leave a digital trail. I put on a black outfit, pulled my hair back, and put on a dark face mask and large glasses to make recognition difficult. At the last minute, I decided to bring a small pair of sewing scissors that I kept in a drawer. They weren't a real weapon, but they gave me some sense of security. The taxi dropped me off a few blocks from the warehouse, as we had agreed. I walked the rest of the way, my whole body tense, alert to any suspicious movement. Night had already fallen, and that industrial area of the Chicagoland area was practically deserted after business hours. The warehouse was an old metal and concrete building, with high, dirty windows. Gabriella was waiting for me at the back entrance, along with two serious-looking men in dark clothing. "Private security guards," she explained briefly. "Everything is ready," she informed me, guiding me inside. Cameras installed at strategic points. High-sensitivity microphones near the main entrance. The car is parked across the street, hidden behind that stack of containers. "You'll stay there with me, monitoring everything." "And when Mark arrives?" I asked. "We'll let him in and wait a bit. When he seems anxious enough, you go in. The guards will be positioned to intervene if necessary, but ideally, he won't see them until it's too late to run." We crossed the empty warehouse, our voices echoing in the large space. Gabriella showed me the tablet where we could watch the footage from the hidden cameras. Then, we positioned ourselves in the car, a dark sedan with tinted windows, from where we could observe the warehouse entrance without being seen. Now, we had to wait. Gabriella had sent a message to Margaret through her phone, which was still in my possession. The message, supposedly from Gabriella, read, "Emergency. Claire found out everything. She has proof of the involvement in Julian's death. She's threatening to go to the police. Meet me at the warehouse in the industrial zone to resolve this. Come alone and bring that document we discussed. Don't reply to this message. Just come." "Margaret won't come personally," Gabriella explained. "She'll send Mark to deal with the problem. The document is our code for something he needs to bring. Probably a weapon or something to simulate another accident." The hours passed slowly. Every minute felt like an eternity as we waited in the tense silence of the car. Gabriella checked the tablet regularly, ensuring the cameras were still working. Finally, around 10 p.m., headlights cut through the darkness. A black car, the same one I had seen Mark driving the night before, approached the warehouse slowly. "It's him," I whispered, feeling my heart skyrocket. Mark parked and stayed inside the vehicle for a few minutes, probably checking the perimeter. When he finally got out, I noticed he was carrying a small briefcase under his arm. He looked in all directions before entering the warehouse. "Is he armed?" I asked, trying to see better in the dark. "Probably," Gabriella answered calmly. "But our men are too. Don't worry." On the tablet, we watched Mark enter the warehouse. He called out for Margaret, his voice echoing in the empty space. He seemed tense, nervous. "It's your time," Gabriella said, squeezing my shoulder lightly. "Remember, we need him to confess. Mention the accident, ask about the brakes, provoke him about Margaret giving the orders." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was the moment I had been preparing for, or trying to prepare for the last 24 hours, the chance to get justice for Julian. "I'm ready," I said, opening the car door. The inside of the warehouse was cold and damp, with the characteristic smell of abandonment. Mark was in the middle of the empty space, illuminated only by the moonlight coming through the high windows. He looked small and fragile there, despite his rigid posture. "Mrs. Margaret?" he called out again, his voice trembling slightly. "She's not here," I replied, stepping out of the shadows. Mark spun around abruptly, his eyes widening as he recognized me despite the mask and glasses. He stepped back instinctively. "Mrs. Morales? What? What's going on? Where is Mrs. Margaret?" "Margaret isn't coming, Mark," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear. "It's just you and me, and that briefcase you brought. What's in it? Another way to silence me? Like you silenced Julian?" He paled, clutching the briefcase to his chest like a shield. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am. Mrs. Margaret sent me to pick up some documents, that's all." "Liar," I accused, taking a step toward him. "We know everything, Mark. About how you sabotaged the brakes on Julian's car, About the money you paid the mechanic. We have the security camera footage from the garage. That hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, panic evident on his face. No, it wasn't my fault, he stammered. I just did what I was told. Who told you, Mark? Say it. My voice sounded stronger than I expected, fueled by the rage growing inside me. Mrs. Margaret, he finally admitted, defeated. She said it was necessary, that Mr. Julian was going to destroy everything she built. My entire body was shaking, but I kept pressing. How did you do it? Tell me every detail. The words began to pour out of him like a desperate confession. She gave me money to pay Ben, a mechanic I knew. I went to the garage late at night, after it closed. Ben damaged the brake line, made it look like natural wear and tear. It was just supposed to be an accident. Mr. Julian wasn't supposed to die. His last words sounded like a plea, as if he could absolve himself of guilt by claiming death wasn't the ultimate goal. But he did, Mark. My husband died because you chose to follow criminal orders. And now Margaret wants to kill me too, right? Is that why you're here? Mark looked at the briefcase in his hands, guilt written on every line of his face. A sedative, he admitted in a low voice. She said to make it look like a suicide. That you were distraught since Mr. Julian's death, that no one would suspect. At that moment, I heard a slight noise behind me. Before I could turn, a familiar voice cut through the air. You incompetent idiot. Margaret was standing in the side entrance of the warehouse, an imposing figure even in the semi-darkness. Her face was contorted in a mask of cold fury. Beside her was a man I didn't recognize, holding what looked like a gun. My blood ran cold. The plan had failed. Margaret wasn't supposed to be here. Mrs. Margaret. Mark looked as shocked as I was, I thought. Shut up, she ordered, walking into the warehouse. I thought after so many years working for me, you would be more discreet, more efficient, but no. At the first sign of pressure, you confess everything. Her gaze turned to me, icy and calculating. And you, Claire? Did you really think you could corner me like this? That I wouldn't notice such an obvious trap? How did you know? I managed to ask, my throat dry with fear. A faint smile curved her lips. The message. Gabriella would never call me for a personal meeting. Our agreements are always remote, bank transfers, and she would never, ever mention the accident in writing. It was amateurish, Claire. My mind was racing. Where were Gabriella's guards? Where was Gabriella herself? As if reading my thoughts, Margaret continued. If you're looking for your new friend, don't worry. She's fine. Being kept company by my men in the car where you were hiding. Gabriella was always too ambitious for her own good. I realized we were lost. The plan had backfired. Margaret was smarter. She had more resources. She was always one step ahead. You killed your own son, I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice despite the fear. How can you live with yourself after that? Margaret looked at me as if I were a naive child. Business is business, Claire. Julian chose to get in my way. It was a business decision, nothing personal. Nothing personal? I repeated, incredulous. He was your son. He was a traitor, she replied coldly. He discovered my deals with certain companies, necessary embezzlement to maintain the empire I built. He threatened to turn me over to the authorities, to destroy everything. What other choice did I have? Her coldness was appalling. There was no remorse, only calculation. To Margaret, Julian was just a variable in her equation of power and money. And now, I asked, are you going to kill me too? Do you think that will end your problems? Margaret sighed, as if bored with the conversation. Frankly, Claire, you've caused more trouble than you're worth. You could have continued your life quietly with the generous pension I granted you, but you had to meddle. She made a slight gesture to the man beside her, who took a step forward. I recognized him then. He was one of the guards from the company building. Another employee, loyal to Margaret, willing to do her dirty work. It will be quick, I promise, Margaret said, almost gently. Mark, give me the syringe. Mark, visibly trembling, handed her the briefcase. Margaret opened it and removed a syringe filled with a clear liquid. An efficient cocktail, she explained. It will look like a heart attack. The poor widow, consumed by grief, succumbed to the pain of loss. How tragic. I backed away instinctively, my hand finding the small scissors I had hidden in my pocket, a useless object against a gun, but it was all I had. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, trying to buy time. "Gabriella has copies of all the evidence. If something happens to me, it all goes to the police." Margaret laughed. "A weak bluff, Claire. Gabriella is too smart to leave evidence lying around. She knows the value of insurance, but she also knows the value of being the only one who has it." I was cornered. My eyes scanned the warehouse, desperately searching for an exit. That's when I noticed movement in the shadows behind Margaret. I kept my gaze fixed on her, trying not to give away what I had seen. "Before you do this," I said, my voice calmer now, "I want to know one thing. Julian's will, you forged it, didn't you? To take control of everything." Margaret seemed slightly surprised by the change of topic, but answered with pride. "Of course, Julian had left everything to you, the sentimental fool, but it was easy to replace the document while you were lost in grief." "And the embezzlement? How much exactly did you steal from the company?" A smug smile formed on her face. "Millions, dear, over decades. Enough to ensure that no one could ever touch me. I have judges, politicians, all on my payroll." As she spoke, the shadows behind her moved slowly. I recognized Gabriella's 2 guards approaching stealthily. There was still hope. "And you really think you can silence everyone?" I continued, keeping her attention on me. "Mark, me, Gabriella. How many more people will you have to kill to protect your secret?" Margaret shrugged. "As many as necessary. In the business world, Claire, only the strong survive. And I." Her words were interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance, getting closer quickly. Blue and red lights began to illuminate the high windows of the warehouse. Margaret's face transformed into pure fury. "What did you do?" she hissed. In that instant, Gabriella's guards advanced from the shadows. One of them immobilized the armed man with surprising speed, while the other grabbed Mark, who didn't even try to resist. Margaret was paralyzed for a moment, the syringe still in her hand. Then, with a quick movement, she lunged at me. I managed to dodge her, but I felt the needle graze my arm. Before she could try again, Gabriella emerged from the side entrance, limping slightly, but with a triumphant expression. "It's over, Margaret," she declared. The sound of several police cars parking outside filled the air. Armed officers flooded the warehouse, shouting orders. "Police! Everybody freeze!" Everything happened very quickly after that. Margaret, Mark, and the guard were handcuffed and taken outside. Gabriella approached me, a faint bruise forming on her face. "We did it," she said, exhausted but satisfied. "We recorded everything. Her confession about the will, the embezzlement, everything." "How did you escape?" I asked, still trying to understand how we had survived. "Your men weren't as good as mine," she replied with a tired smile. "And I had already called the police before we even entered the warehouse. An extra insurance policy, let's say. An officer approached us, asking us to accompany the others to give a statement. As we walked outside, I watched Margaret being put into the police car. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no longer arrogance in her eyes, just cold rage and the understanding that, finally, she had been defeated. The months that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and legal procedures. The case was widely reported. Prominent businesswoman accused of ordering her own son's murder, turning our family tragedy into a public scandal. Margaret's recorded confession in the warehouse, combined with Mark's detailed statement and the security camera footage from the garage, provided irrefutable proof. The investigations revealed the extent of Margaret's crimes. In addition to Julian's murder, there was an embezzlement scheme that stretched back more than 2 decades, involving bribes to politicians and public officials. The trial was swift and ruthless. Margaret was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, attempted murder, and financial crimes. Mark received a lesser sentence for cooperating with the investigation, but would still face long years behind bars. As for me, I had to learn to live with a new reality. Julian's original will was found in a secret safe of Margaret's, confirming that I was the true heir to a large part of the assets and the company. Suddenly, I found myself at the head of a business empire I never wanted to command. Gabriella became a valuable ally in that process. Her business expertise and knowledge of the housing project she had developed with Julian were fundamental for me to begin to understand the company's operations. One autumn afternoon, 6 months after Margaret's imprisonment, I met Gabriella at the same cafe where we had planned our confrontation. Now, it was a friendly business meeting. "The investors are excited about the housing project," Gabriella commented, analyzing some charts on her tablet. "Following Julian's original vision, we managed to reduce costs without compromising quality. The first units will be ready in less than a year." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and melancholy. He would be happy. It was everything he dreamed of accomplishing. "You're doing an excellent job, Claire," Gabriella said sincerely. "Taking over as CEO of the company wasn't something you were prepared for, but you're handling it admirably." "I'm still learning," I admitted, "but I feel like I'm on the right path. Cleaning up the company's name, undoing the damage Margaret caused, carrying out the projects Julian valued. It's almost like keeping him alive, in a way." Our relationship had evolved into something between friendship and professional partnership. It would never be completely close. There was too much pain and complexity in our shared history. But there was mutual respect. After the meeting, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for months. I drove to the cemetery where Julian was buried. It was the first time I had visited his grave since I discovered the truth about his death. The day was clear, with the late afternoon sun casting long shadows among the headstones. I walked slowly until I found the spot, a simple marble plaque with his name and dates. I placed the flowers I had brought, lilies, his favorites, and sat on the grass beside the grave. "We did it, my love," I whispered, feeling the tears I had held back for so long finally find their way down my face. "Margaret is in prison. The truth is out. Your company is clean now, and we're moving forward with that housing project that meant so much to you." The gentle wind rustled the leaves of the nearby trees like a silent response. "I miss you so much," I continued, my voice choked. "Every day. But now, at least, there's some comfort in knowing that justice was served, that your legacy will continue." I spent almost an hour there, sharing with Julian everything that had happened in recent months. It was cathartic, as if I could finally put a period on that painful chapter of my life. When I got up to leave, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The pain of the loss was still there. It probably always would be. But now there was room for other emotions, too. Pride, determination, maybe even hope. In the following months, I immersed myself in the work of transforming the company. I removed executives compromised by Margaret's schemes, established new protocols for financial transparency, and prioritized the social projects that Julian valued so much. The housing complex, which we named the Julian Morales Project, became a model for affordable and sustainable housing in the Chicagoland area. When the first families began to move into their new homes, we organized a small inauguration ceremony. As I cut the symbolic ribbon, I looked up at the clear sky of that spring morning and smiled. Somewhere, Julian was smiling too. A journalist approached me after the ceremony, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Morales, how does it feel to be realizing your late husband's dream, especially after everything that's happened?" I thought for a moment before answering. "I feel that life sometimes takes us down paths we never imagined traveling. When I found that forgotten cell phone on my sofa a year ago, I had no idea it would lead me to discover such a painful truth, but also to an opportunity to seek justice and continue Julian's legacy." "And what about Margaret? Have you visited her in prison?" I shook my head. Some wounds are too deep to be healed with words. I've learned that justice and revenge are different things. I no longer carry hatred for her, only the certainty that she is paying for what she did. The reporter seemed satisfied with the answer, but asked one last question. "What's next for you, Claire Morales?" I looked at the housing complex, at the families already beginning to make that place their home, at the future we were building. "To continue," I replied simply. "To continue building, growing, learning. Julian taught me that we can use the power of business to do good. That will always be our company's true north as long as I am at the helm." That night, alone at home, I opened a bottle of wine that Julian and I had been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass for myself and placed another beside it, in his memory. Sitting on the balcony, watching the stars, I thought about how life could change in an instant. A forgotten cell phone, a photo on the screen, a revealing message, and nothing was ever the same again. The pain of betrayal and loss would never completely disappear, but now there was room for something more, for purpose, for a new beginning, for, perhaps one day, even happiness. I raised my glass to the starry sky. For you, my love, for justice, for new beginnings, and for the first time in a long time, the smile that came to my lips was not forced or melancholy. It was real, genuine, a reflection of the peace I was finally beginning to find. 3 years passed since that fateful night when I discovered the truth about Julian's death. Time, that ruthless and generous teacher, slowly transformed my pain into something more bearable, a scar that, although permanent, no longer hurt with every movement. The company, now rebranded as the Morales Group, thrived under a new business philosophy. The housing project we started expanded to 3 cities, providing decent housing for hundreds of families. Each new opening was like a small tribute to Julian's vision. That morning, as I was getting ready for another day of work, I received an official envelope. It was a notification from the prison system. Margaret had requested a visit from me. After 3 years of absolute silence, she wanted to see me. My first reaction was to refuse. What could we possibly have to talk about after everything? But something inside me, curiosity, a need for closure, or maybe just the desire to understand, made me accept. The women's prison was a cold, oppressive place, despite attempts at humanization. I was led through gray corridors to a visiting room with fixed tables and plastic chairs. When Margaret entered, escorted by a guard, I almost didn't recognize her. The 3 years in prison had left deep marks. Her hair, once impeccably dyed and styled, was gray and lifeless. Her face, once firm and authoritarian, was marked by deep wrinkles. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, remained the same. "Claire," she said, sitting across from me. Her voice was hoarse, as if she spoke little. "Thank you for coming. Why did you call me here, Margaret?" I asked directly, without preamble. She studied me for a moment before answering. "You're different, stronger. The company must be doing well under your command." I didn't respond. I wasn't there to discuss business. Margaret seemed to understand my silence. "I called you because I'm dying, Claire. Cancer. Terminal. The doctors give me a few months, at most." The news took me by surprise. I didn't expect to feel compassion, but something like it crossed my heart. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be," she replied with a faint, bitter smile. "That's not why I'm telling you. I just want to put some things in order before I go." Margaret spread her wrinkled hands on the table. "I've never regretted anything in my life, Claire. Every decision I made was calculated, thought out to protect what I built. But there's something about facing death that makes you look back differently." I remained silent, watching her intently. It was hard to believe anything that came from that woman. "Julian was like his father," she continued, a distant look in her eyes. "An idealist. He believed he could change the world. I always knew he would end up turning against me one day. It was only a matter of time." "That doesn't justify what you did," I replied, keeping my voice firm. "He was your son." In my distorted mind, it was him or me, Margaret admitted, without a hint of emotion in her voice. "The empire I built, the power I conquered, they were always more important than any family tie." I realized too late that I was wrong. I studied her face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse, but I only found the same calculating mask as always. "If you called me here expecting forgiveness, Margaret, you're wasting your time." She laughed, a harsh sound that soon turned into a dry cough. "Forgiveness? No, Claire. I know I don't deserve it, nor am I asking for it. I called you for a more practical reason." Margaret took a thin envelope she had brought with her and pushed it across the table toward me. "What is this?" I asked, not touching the envelope. "A final will, legally validated, confirming that all my personal assets, those not confiscated by the state, are to be allocated to the Julian Morales project." This surprised me. "Why?" "It's not redemption," she answered honestly. "It's just an attempt to balance the scales, even if only minimally." Maybe the money I used to destroy can now be used to build. I took the envelope reluctantly. I didn't know what to feel at that moment. It wasn't forgiveness, nor understanding. Just a strange feeling that a cycle was closing. There's something else, Margaret continued. In the main company's safe, behind the painting in the CEO's office, there is a journal. My journal? It contains details of all the schemes I carried out over the years. Names, dates, amounts. It might be useful for recovering more embezzled funds. Why are you telling me this now? Margaret looked at her wrinkled hands. Because death has a peculiar way of clarifying things. I don't want my mistakes to be buried with me. Our conversation didn't last much longer. There was no forgiveness to be offered, no redemption to be found in those final words. As I stood up to leave, Margaret called my name one last time. Claire, Julian would be proud of what you've done with the company. I stopped for a moment, without turning around. I know, I replied simply, and continued walking. Margaret died 2 months later, alone in a prison infirmary. I didn't attend the sparse funeral, but I sent flowers, not for her, but for what she could have been if she had chosen a different path. The journal was exactly where she had indicated. The information it contained allowed us to recover millions in diverted funds, which were directed to the expansion of the company's social projects. Life went on. The pain of Julian's loss never completely disappeared, but I learned to live with it, to transform it into fuel to do the good he always wanted to bring into the world. On a sunny spring afternoon, 5 years after the discovery of the cell phone that changed everything, we inaugurated the largest unit of the Julian Morales project to date, a complex that combined affordable housing, a community center, a school, and green space in a previously neglected neighborhood. Gabriella was by my side during the opening ceremony. Our professional partnership had blossomed over the years, built on mutual respect and a shared goal. He would be proud, she said, as we watched families exploring their new homes. Yes, he would, I agreed, feeling a peace that took years to find. That night I returned home. No longer the house I had shared with Julian, but a new apartment that represented my new beginning. On the coffee table was a picture frame with the photo of my husband smiling, wearing his favorite blue shirt. I looked at that image that had once caused me so much shock and pain when it appeared on the screen of a forgotten cell phone. Now, it brought only sweet memories, the memory of a love that, even interrupted by tragedy, had changed my life forever. I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset color the sky. Life had taken me down paths I never imagined, traveling from grief to discovery, from discovery to the fight for justice, and from justice to rebuilding. It hadn't been easy. There were days when the weight of loneliness seemed unbearable, nights when I woke up screaming from nightmares about that night in the warehouse. But every emotional scar was a reminder that I had survived, that I had found strength where I thought none existed. The truth behind Julian's death had been revealed by a simple accident: a forgotten cell phone on a sofa, a picture on the screen, a revealing message. What would my life have been like if Margaret hadn't forgotten her phone that day? I probably never would have known the truth. I would have continued living in ignorance, believing the lie of the accident. Sometimes destiny pushes us into the abyss, only to show us that we have wings to fly. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the darkening sky. For you, Julian. For everything you taught me. For everything we are still building together, even if you're not here to see it. And I smiled, no longer with sadness, but with the serenity of someone who finally found their way after the storm. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there.